Hello, everybody. Josh Neighbors here, Locked On Big 12 podcast. Today it is the 17th of August, 2022. On today's show, the latest on conference realignment. Is the Big 10 done? Searching for teams. How does that affect the Big 12? We'll kind of take stock of where we are because we're approaching the football season. Our focus is going to shift to what's happening on the field. We got to check what's happening off the field first. I want to thank you all for making Locked On Big 12, your first listen every single day. Make sure you follow us on Twitter at LO Big 12. You guys can follow me at Josh Neighbors _ as well. All right, folks. So as I mentioned, we are getting towards the football season. And, I think we're starting to not forget about conference realignment, but we're putting it in the rear view mirror for the time being, because always, as we know, these bombs will drop out of anywhere. Now, I can't think if we've had anything super significant happen during the actual season, right? I know that things were finalized in September last year for the Big 12, bringing in the 4 new teams. But I feel like for the most part, a lot of the conference realignment stuff, at least as it pertains to us, has happened really before the season has gotten going. And now we're just a week and a half away till games, when we're now 2.5 weeks away until Big 12 games, right? 2 weeks from this Saturday, we'll have Big 12 games. A week from this Saturday, we're going to have week 0 games, and the Big 10 will get going. So I think it's kind of important that we talk about, hey, what's the Big 10 doing? And I saw this tweet from John Wilner this morning. I'm going to read it to you all. John Wilner, Pac-12 Hotline, does a great job. I know the Pac-12 and Big 12 are at war, and John has been at the center of that war. But he says, source, the only conference that's truly aligned right now is the SEC, end quote. And then he puts in parentheses, hotline aside, the longer the Big 10 goes without finalizing the media contract, the more I wonder if a faction of the leadership is pushing to add new teams now, ... even if Fox is tapped out. So interesting couple thoughts here. Let's attack the first part of this about the SEC being the only aligned conference. And once again, that source saying that could be somebody in the Big 10, it could be an AD somewhere, whatever it is. It could be a Big 10 AD who is currently dissenting. It could be a Pac-12 AD. We don't know, just a source. But we trust John. It's an interesting concept, right? The SEC is aligned. I would say that the ACC is aligned in the fact that everybody hates their deal. I think that's pretty safe to say, right? I think everybody on that side of things hates that deal. As we've seen in Big 12 country, a lot of you all, the fans out there, are not aligned about who should be coming and going, whether Pac-12 schools have a place in the Big 12 conference. So I definitely think, not saying things are negative, not saying everybody being, because alignment's a word we've used so much recently, conference realignment. Is everybody aligned in terms of values? And is a coach aligned with the AD and the president? All those things. It doesn't necessarily have to be, and it doesn't have to be a negative word, right? Like for the Big 10, it's not necessarily negative that they're not all aligned on what they should do next. They're in a really good spot, kind of regardless of what they do. I think it's the Pac-12 obviously not aligned. They're trying to put that forward face, and we'll get more details as kind of that exclusive window is closed, it sounds like, and we'll see what's going on now for the Pac-12. And I bet there's some dissension in the Big 12 about, hey, whether or not they should start going, maybe they should open up their TV deal negotiation sooner. What's really stopping them from doing it, obviously, and I think we'll get to that in a little bit, but I think they want to go with ESPN. They want to go with Fox, maybe, if Fox is tapped out. Part 2 of this, Fox being tapped out. So we know that the incoming deal is going to be worth somewhere in the range of $1 billion, right? That's what we think that the deal is going to be. $1 billion a season is what we think that this television deal is going to be worth. And Fox is going to maintain a majority of this deal. Once again, it sounds like this is kind of set in stone. Not always set in stone, but for most part, it's pretty good to go. Is Fox looking to add more content? Because we know it sounds like FS1 is going to get Big 10 football games. it sounds like the Big Ten, the Big Ten Network is going to get football games, right? What else is going to be on Fox? Well, we got the big noon kickoff, we got the big game, but there hasn't been much discussion about what else is Fox going to do. And I was working yesterday um, with Robbie Triano over at SiriusXM. You guys seen on the show, doing Big 12 today. We had Bob Thompson on, who used to be the president over at Fox International, kind of, and handle a lot of their sports stuff. And he's been on Twitter recently and has, been really open about talking. He's not sure that Fox is done. And he made a really good point. He said that everybody thinks in television, every product has eventually got a cap. But he said the one difference really that we've seen is live sports. Live sports have not stopped growing in terms of value. He's right about that. I mean, you can say that some deals are bad, right? But really in terms of the value, and we're talking about college football here, I mean, the values are skyrocketing, right? People are now, they used to, he said this too, they used to sign these long-term deals for security, right? It was nice to have deals that span 10, 12 years. So you could say, if you're a conference, we just secured $3 billion. If you're a TV network, you could say we've now secured the rights to Conference X for Y amount of years, right? We've got the live sports in hand. Now, because the value of these products continues to increase, we've mentioned this a lot on this show, why would you sign any deal that's longer than 3, 4, or 5 years, right? You think 5 years is kind of the cap of where you want to go on one of these deals, especially if you're a conference like the Big 12, because as nice as it is to be locked into a television deal, everybody, with a changing landscape, that's new opportunities, right? New schools that could be added, new players in the media space could be wanting a piece of the pie, a piece of the live sports. And look, college football, everybody, is the second most popular sport in America, right? Sundays and Saturdays are bananas. Just the Sundays are super bananas. The Saturdays are still a handful of bananas, right? I mean, it's still crazy the ratings these things get. So the values are increased. That's why you're not going to see deals that are this big. So I'm curious, and kind of back to the point about Fox, like, I think it's very interesting. Is Fox done? That might be a separate question of, is the Big Ten done, right? Now, if the Big Ten adds extra schools here before they sign off on this Fox deal, will that deal go up? Let's see. Or if the Big Ten adds Pac-12 schools, Oregon, Washington, Stanford, and Cal, does the deal go up? We'll see. We have to wait and find out for that. But I also, I think with that, like, we have to consider, okay, what is the Big Ten's goal when you add these extra teams? Well, it might not be just about Fox. I think the one thing, and Nicole Auerbach has mentioned this, she'd mentioned this a little while ago, is that the West Coast branch is appealing to them because the West Coast time slot, those late games right now, it's not something they're selling. Now, they can start selling that later on. They're actually in position now to start selling that in 2024, some late slots. But how much is there? Who is going to take it? And look, even if they don't add new teams, maybe the last piece of the puzzle here that we're kind of missing, the reason that we have not had the announcement yet on the Big Ten media deal, is maybe they're talking with an Amazon Prime about, hey, who gets 3 or 4 UCLA games on Amazon Prime, late games out there, a couple USC games, a USC versus an Indiana, right? USC versus Illinois, USC versus ASU. They can't play them anymore. You see what I'm saying? Make Rutgers play at 10 o'clock. I don't know. That's kind of what I'm saying. But also, if you add more of those teams, that adds more inventory to those time slots. And actually, you can have some naturally occurring late games, right? You can have a Washington USC at 10 p.m. You can have an Oregon versus UCLA at a 9 p.m. Eastern, 10 p.m. Eastern. And you can actually, in addition to maybe making some of those East Coast teams or Midwest teams play in some of those late time slots. So, I think that's something we have to watch here, is that, and once again, I'm not putting this out there. I'm just saying we read what Nicole said. And look, if y'all don't read Nicole Auerbach, The Athletic, you all should. She does a great job, her coverage, and she knows the Big Ten very, very well. She is entrenched in Big Ten country. And John Wilner, obviously, I know we've talked about some of the things that John said on this show, but usually his reporting is pretty solid. Now, is he a Pac-12 optimist? Sure. I mean, it's his life. I'm a Big 12 optimist. I do it for SiriusXM. I do it here. So, I'm going to have a little bit of Big 12 bias as well. I'm not going to send shots across the bow here to the Pac-12 a ton. That's not my goal here, but I'm just saying John did bring this up that, hey, the Pac-12 could be looking for more schools. They could be, or some members of the Big Ten could be going on to add more schools. He said, I wonder if a faction of the leadership is pushing to add teams, ... even if Fox is tapped out. I don't think John would say, I wonder, unless he's heard some chatter about this before. So once again, there are multiple angles here. I think if we're talking about the Big Ten adding schools, we're talking about them trying to get one more time slot in there. And then they'll sell it. That doesn't necessarily mean they'll sell it to Fox. The other piece of this that we're talking about is the Fox being tapped out part. Now, are they tapped out in terms of Big Ten, or are they tapped out in general, with the live sports, or what they can pay for live sports, generally speaking? That's a huge question that I have, because one thing Bob Thompson mentioned yesterday was, I think the best thing for the Big 12 is doing a media deal where they kind of keep what they've got right now. So, if they could find a way to pull that off, that would be excellent for them if they could end up making that happen. Let's talk about that in 1 second. All right, everybody. Today's show is brought to you all by the people at Drive Sober or Get Pulled Over, the NHTSA. You guys know the deal, all right? If you go, especially as we hit college football season, all right? You're going over to somebody's house to watch football. You drive over there, all right? Don't have a few drinks. Don't have 4, 5, 6 drinks, and then you can drive home, all right? Make sure you stay hydrated as well. Sneak a water in there occasionally, but you guys know the drill, all right? It is dangerous to drive drunk. I know people have gotten DUIs. I know people have gotten in wrecks, and I knew a family from school. Somebody lost their life as well. Really sad. Do not be the reason of a tragic event. You guys know the rules. Drive sober or get pulled over. All right, so let's talk about the Big 12 side of this, right? Let's just take the perspective of, number one, if the Big Ten goes after the Pac-12 teams, we've kind of been on this block before, but that means that the next ship everybody would want to jump to, I think, is the Big 12, right? I think you would see not everybody, right? If the Big Ten takes Oregon and Washington, I bet Stanford and Cal want to go too. I'm curious if they would. I think also Stanford and Cal would probably want to join the ACC first before they join the Pac-12. I think that's very true. I think a lot of us kind of all agree on that. If they had, if push came to shove, and they still wanted to play Division I athletics, and the ACC was not, or Division I, football and basketball at a high level, and the ACC says no, I mean, I think there is a world in which Cal and Stanford go to the Big 12. Is it good for all parties? I'm not sure everybody thinks that it is. I think that stuff should be put aside, but I know how everybody else feels about this. We've been on this road before, but the politics and that side of things. But I think that's the kind of the world where it happens. The schools that at that point, if the Big Ten is just poaching Oregon and Washington, I mean, the 4 that we've talked about, Colorado, Colorado, Utah, Arizona State, I think they would definitely be interested in joining the Big 12. I think there's no doubt about that. I think they're interested now. I think they might leave without this necessarily kind of force, this is gravity coming down on them, the gravity of the Big Ten coming down on them, depending on how things go, the television contract. But I think, the inertia, getting something in motion here would definitely come. The Big Ten could kind of spur that on. You all know me. I've been skeptical. I mean, once again, I would love Oregon and Washington, and I know not all of you would, but if you're a Big 12 fan, Oregon and Washington add value to this league. They do. They 100% do. I'm sorry. Television ratings just say that. They may not agree politically, but they add value to the league, and that's what I care about, gosh darn it. So I think, when I think about that, like, I would love to have them. That's pipe dream, though. I think, as always, the more likely scenario is that those schools, because of where they're positioned, end up joining the Big Ten. I think that is where we ultimately see them go. When that happens, I'm not sure, but I'm just kind of reading the tea leaves here from John Wilner's tweet and kind of putting together what Nicole Auerbach said. I mean, it sounds like the Big Ten, and I'm sure they've explored it before, but I'm sure some of them want to explore it now because it could add value to their contract. And this is something that we've once again kind of go back to the Big Ten side of things. Like we've mentioned this before, folks. The reason why Pac-12 schools, like, they can claim the rating stuff, like, Washington State gets more ratings, Oklahoma State, yeah, because nobody else is on when Washington State's on, right? That we know. So we know there's value to those late time slots. That's why the Big Ten will want to get involved in that. That's why the Big 12 should want to get involved with that too, and they can offer more of that if they get those Pac-12 schools. So, like, once again, the time slot thing, the Big 12 has a little bit of ability of that now. I mean, I think if they talk to BYU about playing, if they could convince BYU to play 4 of their games each year at 8:00 Mountain Time, I think that would be fantastic because that's 10 p.m. Eastern, and they can offer that to somebody else. So I think having that as a good basis is a great place to go. I think maybe having a couple games that start at 9 p.m. Central, right? Have 4 or 5 Big 12 games, or maybe one Big 12 game each week that starts at 9 p.m. Central. I know it's a really late start, maybe 8:30 Central, right? I think that'd be a good place to go as well. Just trying to push it into those windows because we know for a fact those windows are valuable. But I'd love to. I mean, if you had Utah and you had the Arizonas, you had the Colorados, everybody, that makes that so much easier because number one, those are more locations you can go to. And number two, all of those schools can play each other in those windows. So Arizona can play Arizona State late. Arizona can play Colorado late. Arizona can play Utah late. Utah can play Colorado late. Utah can play Arizona State late. Arizona State can play Colorado late. Arizona State can play Utah late. Like that, once again, inventory. We're talking about inventory here. That increases that late inventory. So, what would the Big Ten adding more schools mean? Probably some gains for the Big 12, not just in teams, but in windows they can offer, which ups the value of their deal. So I talked about maybe start negotiating now. To that point, maybe it's better off the Big 12 waits, which is one of those things I'm sure Brett Yormark and company are they're weighing right now as they decide, hey, when should we proceed forward and start kind of, trying to get these television talks going because they can always bump up that window of time. We saw Pac-12 do it. We know that the Big 12 could probably do it too. And then what's the likelihood that, as Bob Thompson mentioned, like, could the Big 12 get that same package that they currently have back? I know we've talked a million times on this show about what that Big 12 deal is going to look like, where it goes. But I think John brings up an interesting point here. How tapped is Fox? Now, Bob Thompson yesterday, once again, we talked to him on SiriusXM, didn't seem totally convinced that Fox was tapped, but he worked there. So maybe he's got some positive vibes about Fox, whatever. John thinks that maybe that could be the case. Not saying he's not saying that 100%, but he did mention and float that out there. So maybe. But we've talked about this too. Like, okay, I actually wonder if Bob's correct. Like, is the best deal for the Big 12 the one they currently have in terms of exposure? It's great, right? I mean, and ESPN, as we talked about before, has those slots to fill. So being in a combination with Fox and ESPN is still a great place to be. But I think the question is, okay, can you leverage that against, like, with an Amazon, with a Paramount Plus, with an NBC, or the Peacock? Like, can they leverage that and say, okay, we've got some, or, add inventory, they're adding more inventory. Can they put some of those games in those places? Can they make it competitive? Can they add, can they offer more stuff, much of the Big Ten is doing? Can they add packages in different time slots? That's what we're talking about here. And, that's kind of my question is, all right, what is, is Bob Thompson correct? Is the current setup the best package for the Big 12? We're going to touch on that a whole lot more. We'll especially talk about that tonight when we do our roundtable. So we'll let you guys know about that. Or from our sponsors, and I have a quick message from me personally that I'm going to tell you guys about. I'm not going anywhere or anything, just to let you guys know about it. But today's show is brought to you by BetOnline and BetOnline.net. You guys can go to BetOnline today, make an account. It's free to do. And then you guys can get in on all of the wagering action. You guys want to bet on overs and unders for the college football season. They've got some new props coming in there as well. So once again, go to BetOnline and BetOnline.net today. Football, basketball, baseball, soccer, hockey, MMA. You got it all there. BetOnline, BetOnline.net today. All right, so quick note from me. You all know I do 2 podcasts here. I do the Locked On Nationals podcast and the Locked On Big 12 podcast. In 2 weeks, once September hits, I will no longer be doing Locked On Nationals. I will be fully focusing at least my podcasting time on Locked On Big 12. This has been a wonderful community. You all have been so good to me. So I want to appreciate you guys. If you're new to the channel, please subscribe. We're trying to get that number up as we head towards the football season. And that just helps. So, and when it comes to podcasting, I just love how this show has grown and exploded. Want to thank you all for doing that. And so with that, I'm going to focus all of my podcasting time that I have on this league, on this conference, on this channel, on this podcast, on all of you all. So please spread the word. Keep this podcast growing. I appreciate everything you all have done. Make sure you like, subscribe, tell your friends, and let's keep pushing this thing. Keep this thing rolling. Appreciate it. All right, my friends. Till next time, as always, stay safe.